If you have great loyalty to your family, friends, and customers, I think it comes right back at you.
Hello. Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Branstetter, founder and podcast producer at Max Podcasting. And you can, sometimes it sounds like podcasting, B-O-D. No, it's podcasting, Max Podcasting. And you can email me at max@maxpodcasting.com to save time with your high-quality podcast. This is episode 262. And it is the 6th annual Thanksgiving family special episode. If you're not familiar, it has become a tradition. Every episode that we drop during Thanksgiving week involves a family member, a special family business tie, and this episode is another all-star extra special guest. Today's guest is Gary Gottdiener. If that name sounds familiar, it is because he is my father-in-law. Gary is, in addition to being the father of my beautiful wife, Dana, he is the president and owner of the Sample Group and one of the best dudes you will ever come across. I don't know how he'd feel about me calling him a dude, but in this episode, we talk all things with his business, his top business and life lessons, the roller coaster of a journey, as well as some fantastic memories from the wedding, and of course, a look at Gary's liquor cabinet. It is Double G. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here for an extra special Thanksgiving family business edition of the Wild Business Growth Podcast, where I've already stumbled and voice cracked, and we're going to keep that in. But not only is this a special episode where I'm interviewing my father-in-law, Gary Gottdiener, we're also recording this on the 1-year anniversary of the night before Dan and I's wedding. And this is the first ever Wild Business Growth Podcast episode where the host and guest may be slightly intoxicated because we're consuming these really high alcohol Heineken lights during it. So, Gary, this has been a long time coming. Really excited to dive into your story, learn more about you and the business. Thank you for coming to your own house. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Very excited to be here, I think.
I think is the right answer. And I think you have no idea what you're getting into. But no, we joked before this that the easy way to do this would just be to make this a wedding recap part 2, where we just talk about the wedding and reminisce from a year ago the entire time. And we're not going to do that, but I do want to start in that way because you're, the host, the organizer, the maitre d' of the best night of our lives. And so I wanted to know from your perspective, what was the highlight of the wedding for you?
The highlight of the wedding for me was when that hurricane decided not to come towards us and turn north and save us from a pretty bad situation.
Yeah.
But if you want to get into the wedding itself, I had to say my first look had to be the major piece there for sure.
I totally agree. And I thought you looked great. Dana looked okay, but...
Wow. Okay. You're going home with her tomorrow. I don't see her until Thanksgiving.
No. But just endlessly stunning and beautiful, and those are some of the best pictures from the wedding. Is your first look, and it's your first look. It sounds like Gary's first look.
It's still on my phone as the what do we call that? The face page, whatever.
The face page. But you mentioned the stress, and you mentioned that in your speech on the wedding night of how much stress there was leading up to the wedding. Wedding planning has enough stress to begin with. And then when you have, a hurricane decided to come right, aimed at Addison Reserve.
Well, seeing that Palm Beach County closed on Wednesday for the entire county, that's pretty bad. Seeing that could have been 3 days earlier, 3 days later. Yeah.
And I still can't believe that everyone made their flights. Like there were very few cancellations and delays.
Everybody made their flights. COVID. I think we did pretty good based on everything that was happening at the time.
I think so.
And people got extra time down in Florida, seeing that few people came a few days early. So the party began little sooner.
So that was the best night of our lives. Today's the second best day of our life because we're recording this interview. But I do want to get into your foray into the business world and your career and company. And I want to start at somewhat of the beginning. I want to start off at college. So you went to University of Rochester, or Rochacha, as they say.
Some people may say that, not everyone.
I don't know if the local Rochacharians say that, but what did you think at the time that you started your studies? What did you think you, quote unquote, wanted to be when you grew up?
I was going to be a dentist.
Really? A dentist?
Yes. So I went to school there because they had a good program. I basically went to Biology 101 and dropped that course pretty quick and said, I'm not going to be a dentist anymore.
What was it? Well, there's two sides to that. What was it about the idea of dentistry that got you excited about that as a potential career path first?
I actually don't know. I mean, at one point, my dad was thinking about being a dentist. And I thought it was kind of a cool direction. I'm good with my hands. And I just quickly found out that that's not where I needed to be.
What was it about biology class that had you turn around and say, nope, right away?
It was too tough. I found that the sciences are a really, really tough area, especially up in Rochester, the university. So, yeah, we took a different course very quickly.
Definitely. You mentioned your go with your hands. A funny little aside, you literally fixed a screw in Dana's bathroom right before this interview because the sliding door stopped working. So you're a handyman through and through.
Yeah, we got a lot of tools in the garage for sure.
So how did you then decide to pivot to something in the business and marketing route after that?
I started in political science, was my major, and I minored in economics. University of Rochester didn't have an undergraduate business, degree. Graduated from University of Rochester, looking for a job in the business world, which I felt was more in line with what I wanted to do.
So you started working at a biology company. No, I'm just kidding. So I know then that you ended up working at a company, Economy Color Card.
We can go back. 1982 when I
Please.
graduated was a tough year. We had a good sizable recession at the time, and there was not a lot of hiring. It was very tough to get a job. And so I was looking, I sent out a lot of resumes, got a lot of them filed away, but nothing kind of happened. And that's when my father, who was in the business world, in textiles, told me to go see a couple of companies, actually. And one ended up to be what you had said, Economy Color Card. I sent my resume there. I met with the sales manager at the time. Basically says if I could teach him tennis, I could be hired. Don't laugh. That's actually true.
Quid pro quo. That's a good thing to have to your resume, is tennis instructor.
And that was actually the last resume I ever wrote.
Your father, Steve, Dana's grandpa, so he had the connection to Economy
He had a
Color
connection.
Card?
Yeah, a couple of connections, and I kind of ended up, interviewing with a couple of different companies, but this one was the one that I ended up with.
And real quick, you mentioned Steve was in textiles. What specifically was his business focused on?
He was a knitter of women's wear.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that. I just knew it was textiles. I didn't know the specifics of it.
He made piece goods, which was basically he would sell them to people that made them into dresses.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. This explains why Dana loves dresses so much. I think it goes back multiple generations.
And Cheryl, too.
Blood relatives. But Economy Color Card. So you ended up spending almost multiple decades there. What kind of stuff did you do there?
I was in sales right from the start. The original job was working in the textile market on Fashion on 7th Avenue. And I would actually go from floor to floor, soliciting different businesses that were there to, do what we called swatching. And basically we would do the merchandising of their materials.
Is this what people think of the typical sales role where it's kind of like you're on commission, like you just kind of got to hustle all the time?
Pretty much,
a lot
yeah.
of cold calling.
It was in the beginning, it was brutal. It was all cold calling. I went from floor to floor looking for business. And at that time, the company was smaller. The owner of the company, Don Ackerman, was growing the business. He was going into different industries. The original industry was basically the garment center as we knew it then. But he was getting into wallpaper and different types of catalogs.
What would you say were some of the biggest lessons you learned from that stage of your career when you're doing the full-time sales thing?
I hated cold canvassing.
What'd you hate about it?
Oh, it's just brutal. I mean, to have to go in and explain who and what you do, and then they say, yeah, okay, and here's the door. They'll let it hit you on the way out, or we already have somebody we're happy with, and yeah, we'll call you when we need you, all the lines. I don't think anybody actually likes that part of the business.
Well, it's tough. I think you got to get used to a lot of defeat and a lot of getting, slapped in the face, hitting the face with the door, and hearing no a lot.
Yes, absolutely. You have to have a thick skin.
So over your time with Economy Color Card, and I know it kind of turned into another company as well. Over that time, how much did your role change from those early sales days?
There's always forks in the road, and I got kind of lucky. Somebody in the company had mentioned that there's an industry that we weren't in at the time, and that was window coverings, as far as shades, mini blinds, what people would call the levelers was a generic term. So I actually went to one of those shows. They were from the business I was bringing in the textile or garment area. These were huge jobs. And very quickly, I had built relationships in the industry, started to be very successful in sales in this industry.
You said levelers. What's the name for that?
Leveler?
Leveler?
Leveler is like Kleenex to people. In the old days, you say, oh, you make levelers,
See, I knew I'd learn a lot today. I didn't know I'd learn a whole new word. So this is really eye-opening. So let's get to more of your entrepreneurship journey. Let's get to the sample group. So you kind of alluded to it there, but at what point did it become clear that you're actually going to start a whole separate business one day?
When I was terminated or let go.
That's a good reason.
Probably a good reason. If you have to go back a little further, the company that Don Ackerman had built was going to take another leap forward, and an investment group was going to put money into it and grow the business. At that point, Don had actually taken us from, I guess, Brooklyn, which I was never part of, to New Jersey. And then we built a structure in Mexico. And at that point, the investment group came in and was going to take it to another level. That investment group didn't last long. They decided the investment wasn't a great investment for them, or it didn't match up to what they were looking for. And I always say it's kind of like a Monopoly. When you're kind of done with the board game, you kind of crease the board in half, and all those hotels and everything just fall back into the box.
Right.
Well, that was pretty much it. But there was an opportunity at that point that they offered me the machinery. I took that opportunity along with what was at that point my alter ego, Pat Menente, and the two of us now had a ton of machinery. They gave us good terms, and I needed to find a home for that, which was actually interesting because my father at the time was on his way to retiring, who had a very nice plant in North Carolina, Asheville, and was willing to give us space there. We brought all the machinery we could from Roselle, New Jersey, as well as from Mexico, and we set up shop there. And within probably about 6 months, we took over the entire plant. My father got to retire, and we started the business down there.
Well, shout out your longtime partner, Pat, and shout out Asheville. A little foreshadowing. We'll get to more Asheville stuff in a little bit. It mainly be just because Dana and I love Asheville. But, from day one then, was it called the Sample Group yet, or did that come later?
Nope. That when we set up shop, we actually needed a new name for our company, and it was the Sample Group.
I like it. It's funny these days. I feel like so many companies, and it applies in the podcast world too. Like people try to be so overly complex with their name, and people there's kind of like a movement now to just be as straightforward as possible and like good with search terms. And so the Sample Group, like you immediately know it's related to samples and sample books.
Yeah, but it was also that we put group there just because we're a tiny little company, but it sounded like we were
It
was a bigger group. It was a bigger group.
This is like there's like scenes in shows and movies where they're like, let me forward you on to like my assistant, and then it's like the same person picks up the phone
exactly.
again.
Yeah, we had a few of those.
Exactly. You show up with the Groucho mustache. But so the Sample Group. So what were the early days of that like? Like how did you manage to start winning clients and actually start to bring business in?
Well, that was the other success or lucky piece of the puzzle. Since the investment group was out, they really weren't focused on this piece of the business. At that point, we were also doing flooring. They kept that, but they let me take all my customers from the window coverings. We were very lucky that our customer base, the largest piece of it, came with us and gave us that opportunity to do business for them.
If you look back now, coming up on 2.5 decades in business, which is awesome. There's all the stats about most businesses don't make it 6 months or a year, or whatever the latest stats are on that, but and really been a huge part of your family and your kids' life as Dan and Adam have grown up. When you look back over the time of the business, what have been like your tried and true kind of biggest products or biggest, I guess, sectors that you made sample books in?
Well, the window coverings for sure is the largest. We had the largest programs running for many years, and there was ups and downs. In that time period, we had a factory in Mexico, we had a factory in China. Through those ups and downs, we ended up back just in North Carolina. But certainly the window coverings industry has been very good to us as far as the amount of business that we brought in. And we also ups and downs with the flooring business that eventually we were able to regain. But also was good because we were able to work two different industries that had used different machinery and skills. So it kind of worked to our benefit.
And for anybody who's listening and not familiar with your business, what are the main, you don't need to list specific names, but what's like a typical client that you work with? Like, what are they, stores, or is it like B2B, or?
It's main manufacturing. The Hunter Douglases of the world, the Armstrongs of the world were original clients of ours. Different divisions as those companies, especially Hunter Douglas, grew into different divisions. We were very successful in being able to work with all those different divisions. So although it was one main company, it was a lot of different people, a lot of different divisions that was like working with separate companies.
I'm not trying to make you reveal any IP or trade secrets or patents here, so you can answer if you want or not. But how have you, like, one of the things that amazes me about your business is the fact that you work with so many different materials. Like it's it's fully custom, it's very hands-on. How have you been able to, over the years, work with such a range of clients and like different materials and, not drive people crazy?
Well, I mean, I think that was part of where I even started when I was going to go into dentistry. I was good with my hands. I have a really good understanding of design, of coming up with different opportunities with the sampling. And I would basically come back to the factory after meeting with a customer and say, we need to design this. A lot of the stuff that we did was always custom. It was always new. We didn't know if it would work. And I was always bringing something strange in, and between my partner and I brought it in and kind of gave him the concept of what we're trying to do, and he would kind of make it happen. So we were a good team.
How many years or months or days or decades in did you feel like, all right, this is like a real business with momentum, like we've reached a good level?
Well, actually, we had big levels and very small levels. I don't know. I think it was on a yearly basis. I think my partner and I would get to the holidays, end of the year, and we would toast each other that we made it through another year. I don't know that we ever thought that it was big or small. It was just what we kind of did. And always were just looking to the next year that, what the future would bring. We did, try to buy companies and, like I said, built factories in different countries and things like that. And the end, it all kind of worked out.
That's something that you hear about so often with entrepreneurship is like, even if you think something's going to be smooth sailing, there's always a roller coaster of up and down. And there is kind of a sentiment of like, oh, like, thank God we made it through another year. You just kind of internally, how were you and are you able to manage and navigate so many ups and downs, over time like that?
Some of it's just lucky. Just when you think things are going the wrong way, you get a new order or you got a new customer. Others, Pat, my partner, was very good at shrinking the company when it needed to and expanding it when it needed to. We were the yin and yang. I was the sales and finance, and he was operations, production, and established a good team down in Asheville. And between the two of us, we complemented each other pretty well.
Well, I have to compliment you. No, I just couldn't resist. Like those are really good roles that complement each other with you and Pat. How did you decide those in the early days?
Well, that's where we started. We both actually, I met Pat. He was already at Economy Color Card when I got there in 1982. And so we started the company in 1999. So Pat and I were pretty much, as I was growing the sales business, Pat became the inside operations guy for basically my work. So we worked together for many, many years. Pat started basically as a printer in the company and ended up to run all the operations for my sales. So when the investment group let me go first, and Pat was still there, and I was trying to figure out how we were going to do this, Pat was all game to jump on board. It was just a matter of time probably that he would have got laid off, and between the two of us, our roles were pretty much established already. And my father gave us, like I said, the initial plan and support because we used a lot of his people in the beginning. So we kind of hit the sidewalk running.
It's a beautiful thing that, probably one of your lowest moments when you nobody likes getting laid off, but it turned out to be a real blessing in disguise because that opened the door for this beautiful business that you've built and been a huge part of the family, a huge part of your life. Did you ever think from the early days of starting the sample group that this would be something that, can last and grow over multiple decades?
Was hoping, but every day was a new adventure and those ups and downs. But the being laid off was not a surprise to me. As we were like maneuvering through what the investment group direction was, it was just a matter of time. So I was already, thinking of what the next play would be. And when eventually that happened, we had to move kind of quickly. We were just lucky that our customers were willing to support us.
Yeah, and that's everything. Those moments that were more peaks for the company as opposed to the valleys, what would you say have been the biggest driver, like the secret sauce that's worked really well for you in the company that have led to growth over the years?
I'd say loyalty to my customers. No matter what was happening, we were supporting them. I mean, in an industry where everything's custom and everything's new, and they're coming out with new products, that we would do everything we could to make sure that we hit deliveries. Because at the same time, we're trying to figure out how to produce for them They're actually making their new goods and hoping that those goods are going to be acceptable in the marketplace. So again, they were working on what they needed to get done, because it's an interesting industry that I'm in, that the biggest resource that we're using is their goods. So it's not like I'm working with my vendors to make something for them. I do that, but the biggest piece that is being supplied to me is from the customer. So if the customer's goods aren't good, or they're late, or anything kind of stops you from manufacturing. So it's always been, a very tough scenario. My biggest supplier is my customer, which is not normal in an industry. Most industries, you buy metal from X, you buy, glue from Y, and you make something, and then you sell it. I have to wait for my customers' goods in order to produce.
Yeah, it's a really, really cool, a really unique business and setup there. I think that loyalty piece is so strong. And when you think about any family business or any, what started quote unquote small business over the years, that customer service is like everything. Like that's why people love working with businesses like that, and go over the top for your customers. And in your case, it's over the top for your suppliers at the same time. So that's pretty cool. 2 birds, 1 stone. But in addition to making sure that, shipments, deliveries are on time, not delayed, things like that, what else has been super valuable for you as a company, just to make sure that you're always going over the top for those, loyal customers?
Well, it's my team, for sure. I mean, we've always had a really good team between, Pat, Susan. I mean, most of my team has been with me for a very long time, certainly from the beginning, and when we started in Nashville in '99, and very supportive. And our operations and systems that are in place catch a lot of our customers' mistakes and issues, early on, so that we're able to make them look good, and which then makes us look good.
So you segued brilliantly. I mentioned earlier that I wanted to talk more about Asheville, and that's another really interesting part of your life and the business, is that I ordered it as your work schedule. Often it's almost like you're a traveling consultant, where you'll fly during the week, you'll work in Asheville, fly back. I know Dana's mentioned that growing up, there are a lot of times that you'd fly down to Asheville, be back, work at the plant during the week, be back for the weekends or later in the week. Which there's a lot of perks to being in person, but also obviously that can be difficult with family time. So I want to dig into that, and then kind of Asheville as a whole. But how would you characterize kind of that travel-heavy schedule that you've had for so long?
It's very hard, especially when the kids were young. But I was able to always kind of maneuver my schedule around family time. I was always home on weekends, and certainly if they had something that was important during the week, I would work around that schedule. I always said that I was no different than some guy on Wall Street who worked late at night, came home, and the kids were already in bed. So, right. And then they left early in the morning. So during the week, I was gone a lot. It was very tough for me, because not only did I need to get to Asheville, but I also had to see customers. So it wasn't like I was just going down there every other week. But that's where, my partner Pat came in. He was operations, so he was in Asheville more than I was in those days. We actually, we shared an apartment in the early days. We ended up with our own places later. But, we were a tight-knit group at that time.
So there's a couple aspects of that I'm really, really fascinated about. One, kind of on the tougher note that you mentioned, like how have you been able to still feel as connected and close to, your family, your kids, Cheryl, as possible, like when you were traveling on that? Because, this was long before FaceTime started and technology like that.
I guess it was phone calls. And again, the everyday type thing I didn't necessarily see, but I would say the important occasions, I was always there. It was just one of the sacrifices of building the business. I think most people are in that situation to some degree. Nobody in those days, or even now, has a 9 to 5. A lot more people can work from home. And in fact, since the technologies came, it was less travel to the plant because we were able to use the new technologies that popped up, like the Zooms and things like that. In fact, I'd say that we've used that a lot more, especially with COVID. I think that convinced the entire world, which just was easy for me. Nobody was traveling. So, and customers didn't even want to see you. So there was a lot more phone or Zoom conference calls, things like that. So
it's a funny place to be in when customers they don't want to see you. They want no part of you.
Right.
No, but I was joking with you that you were really ahead of the curve on that travel schedule, because I just saw an article on LinkedIn that was, I forget the term, it's like super commuting or something like that, where now there's a growing number of people where their commute is technically 4 or 5 hours each way because they live in a completely different state, and they'll fly somewhere where they just have to be in the office once or twice a week. And so you really were ahead of the curve on that. It's kind of what you were doing.
Yeah, pretty much
reasons.
every other week I would do that. I mean, actually, the travel was a very interesting piece of a puzzle, because when I started in 1982, in the 80s, you had to use a map, and you also had find exactly, and you had to find a payphone to call into the office. For all my travels that I had to go do, you had no idea where you were half the time. And if you got out of the car, I'd get on the payphone and I'd start looking around and realize, you know what, maybe this wasn't the best place to pull over, and I'd get back in the car and call them later. But, I mean, everything that you have now, the conveniences of having cell phones and Google Maps or whatever, I mean, nobody uses a map anymore, and it's changed travel and business, I'd say, dramatically, and made this time of my career a lot easier.
I got to poke a little fun at my dad. I joked that the last time I ever used a map was my dad drove me down for my internship in Dallas after my junior year of college. And somewhere as we got into the Dallas area, we pulled over into like a Walmart parking lot, and he pulls out this like giant atlas and like is poking through like, oh, we got to go here. We got to go here. And I think since then it's been constantly Google Maps and Waze for everybody. I think he was the last one to use a map. So
could be. I mean, you had these triptychs.
Yeah,
you
I remember those.
It was on a spiral, and you'd flip over. I made it to the next page. I made it to the next page. So,
they were perfect for that, like pocket behind the seats, the driver's seats and the passenger seats in the car. So on that note, I don't know if you've traveled a ton outside of work as well, but for just your work, quote unquote, commute, you have to be one of the best people in the world to learn some travel tips from. So what's your tips you have for traveling efficiently or comfortably, just, doing that so often?
I mean, certainly right now to fly to Asheville is pretty convenient, because whether I was in Newark, New Jersey, or down here, Asheville has its own airport. And since I have a condo in Asheville, I only go with a knapsack. So there's nothing that goes underneath. Tips these days, it's a horrible time to travel. In the old days, you get upgrades. They treated you like, a real person. Now, my luck is that I was able to get upgraded in my status for life. So as long as I fly United, I get lots of perks.
Yeah.
The negative to that is you go to another airline and you don't really get much of anything. So my baggage is free. I get a good seat, and so we try to fly United as much as we can.
Yeah, the prices of flights these days, I feel like we're not far from like the first $1 million flight. Like that's what these prices seem like every time. It's going crazy.
Yeah, they're up there for sure, and you get less for it these days.
We'll consider travel a hobby as well, but I want to talk about some of your other hobbies and sports activities you do, because and I'm not just hyping you up, but you're one of the most athletic people I've ever met. Because really good at golf, really good at tennis, you're pretty good at pickleball as well. And, maybe not as good as Dana, but it's a very, you have an incredible skiing family as well. And I know there's more sports in there as well. So there's a wide range of those. But what is it you love so much about, getting out there, hitting balls around? I should probably word that differently. Playing sports like that. What is it that kind of gets your juices flowing?
Well, actually, let's start with that. Growing up, I was probably the worst athlete around. I was the last to get picked, and which got me to focus on, at that time, skiing and tennis. I would say that, in my younger years, I was okay at those, but I did focus on those. And as I got older, I got better at them. When I ended up graduating from college, everybody said that you should play golf because that's more of a business sport than even the tennis and skiing for sure. So I basically dropped my tennis racket, which I had gotten pretty good at, and picked up golf and played a lot of golf over the years, and I've gotten better at that. When I came down to Florida, I picked up my tennis racket again and started playing that. So between the golf and tennis, and if we could get a couple trips out, to go skiing, Dana's grandfather and grandmother have lived in Vermont for quite a long time, so we've gone up there many times. The skiing was, I started when I was 3, and those are kind of the sports that I kind of hone in on. So down here, it's gym, it's golf, it's tennis, and now pickleball.
It's an awesome combo.
Everybody's got pickleball now.
Yeah, well, it's fun. There's a reason why it's exploded so much. But do you have any tips for somebody who wants to play, I guess, diversified sports like that? Like get really good at multiple sports at once.
The tennis and pickleball kind of go hand in hand. I use
literally
my skill. Yeah, I use my skills from my tennis and my pickleball, so they're not that far apart. Golf is a very tough sport. Lessons and a lot of practice. And down here, it's great because it's year round. So you get out whenever you can, and it's a lot of practice and a lot of fun, for sure.
And another thing that you have excelled at and has been a big part in recent years down here is that you're a board member at Addison Reserve.
Oh yeah, so that's a ton of fun.
No, but what
that depends on the day.
Right, but no, it's obviously really cool that you can give back to the community and be involved in kind of a more public role here. But what inspired you to get into that in the first place? And then what would you say we'll keep it to your favorite part of doing that?
There's certainly a love for Addison, but I would say that when we got down here, there were a lot of questions I was asking, and clearly I was one of the newer members, younger than the group that had been here, or the people that had been here longer. And so that enough of my questions said, well, why don't you come on the board? And as you know, before you asked me to do this, I hate interviewing. And
now you love it. We flipped
so it was kind of interesting, but I got on the board fairly easy that year. The year I got on the board, literally 3 days later, we closed the entire club because of COVID. My first year was really dealing with COVID protocols rather than running the club as we normally would. And that was a rude awakening for everybody, because in the early days of COVID, nobody knew what it was going to do to the club or in general. And so we were making the stuff up as we went.
In theory, it makes your second term that much easier. I'm sure there's no headaches.
Yeah, now we worry about the tuna fish and things like that. No, actually, we don't. Damn tuna. We are, as I tell everybody when they ask me questions, the board of directors is strategic. We do not get into the day-to-day operations, but it's been a lot of fun. It's great working with the staff and management and trying to make the club, a better place every day.
So I'm done with the questions that will make you bored, pun intended. But let's switch it up to some unusual questions. So, pet peeves, quirks, weird talents. These are questions that really are just about you and your personality. They don't need to tie to your business at all. Totally, I just love learning, quirks, fun stuff about people's personalities. Some of these I may know, some I may not know. So we'll start with pet peeves. What's something that grinds your gears, as Peter Griffin says? What's something that just kind of ticks you off a little bit?
Oh, I hate when people speak over other people and don't give them the courtesy. Yeah, I have a little bit of OCD. I need to make sure that the handles of all my coffee cups are facing the same way.
Unfortunately for Dana, I didn't know that she grew up with somebody who likes things really organized and in order like that too. And then she married me, and it's the same thing. So sorry, Dana. How about quirks? What's something a little quirky? Really, we should ask Dana and Cheryl and Adam for this one. But what's something a little quirky about your personality that maybe someone's teased you about before, but it's part of who you are?
Cheryl would say I don't listen or I don't hear. I only hear what I want to hear.
I think I have that one as well. What about weird talents, or some say party tricks? Something that, I'm not going to let you use your sports skills for this, but what's something that you just have a knack for, like you're really good about, that has no impact on your business?
I love talking to people. I'm very social. Cheryl would say that I'm way too social, and I'll never get to a table probably 10 minutes later as we go through the club. I always like to be around a lot of people. Cheryl would sometimes like to say that we should be alone more. And she'll also say when I'm traveling, I missed you. And then, 10 minutes later, she'll say, when are you going on your next trip? But
this has turned into a roast Cheryl section. Well,
to.
It's a roasting. It's a
Yeah.
secondhand roasting of yourself.
Yes, exactly.
You don't listen. You talk too much. You travel too much. You don't travel enough. So
Exactly,
it's a good list there. Now for the big hard hitting questions. We're gonna wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A. You ready for it?
Sure.
All right, let's get wild. This first batch I call the Gary Gottdiener Signature Collection. And of course, I'm talking about drinking. And there's a few different categories here. I want to know, because you are a skilled drinker as well, I think we can say. And that kind of seems to run.
Some of my friends would say that for sure.
Seems to run in the family, my family as well. For these, there's a few different categories, but I want you to think about what would be your one brand or one drink of each of these that if you could only drink one for the rest of your life and it had to be that same one every time, what would it be? Price is not an issue for this, so you get it for free. How about scotch?
Macallan's.
Tequila.
1942 would be my number one, probably. If you were going to furnish it for me and I'd have to pay for it, we could drink that for the rest of my life.
Well, let's remind you that this is strictly hypothetical. But,
okay.
but yeah, that's a really, really good one. Bourbon, would you say there's a type of bourbon that you drink the most, or maybe one that you just have sipped and thought, oh wow, that's a really good one?
Woodford Reserve is a good solid one that we make our smoked old fashions with.
Yes,
so
which
that,
also
is also right in my wheelhouse.
That's the bartender Gary classic, the smoked old.
I bring people over for my smoked bourbons for sure.
Right off the flights, whenever we come down here, that's always my first request to drink. So I appreciate you always doing that. It's good stuff. On a different note, we mentioned how much you've traveled to Asheville and back. You have probably set a record for number of TV shows watched on a flight as well. Not a single flight. Well, maybe that too. But what is the TV show that you could watch over and over and over again on a flight and never get sick of it?
I'm a Star Trek fan. I can watch any of the Star Treks over and over again.
The original, or I know there's so many different iterations.
Any of them, but yeah, the original. I mean, you don't see that on TV much anymore. But streaming wise, it would be any of the new series. Would be on my iPhone.
Who is a Star Trek character that you'd love to have an unnamed bourbon with?
Oh, definitely William Shatner. I mean, he's the original Kirk.
The king. Yeah.
King.
The captain.
Yes.
What golfer would you say a professional golfer, you most closely resemble your game after?
Unfortunately, I don't think my game looks like anybody's.
You're humble.
Yeah. I mean, look, I grew up with Tiger Woods.
Well, yeah.
I was like,
I'm going to use that as a poll quote.
We're only
you
using him for his golf, just his golf.
Right.
Watching him continually change his swing. I've continually changed my swing and fine-tuned it.
When you say you grew up with Tiger Woods, some people might take that as you were like neighbors. And,
No. On
growing up,
TV, when he won his first Masters, that stuff was cool.
Back to wedding shout-outs. So, and I actually had one last night at the time of this recording, but signature drinks at the wedding. So we all know Dana had her famous Dana's Del Rey mule, the mule with blueberries, which was delicious. I had the Maxwell Smoke, which was a smoked tequila old fashioned. If you could go back and have, and maybe you did, I don't know, but if you could have a signature drink at your wedding, what do you think it would be?
Macallan's, and it would be tough on my dad to have to pay for all that, but yeah, that's probably my go-to. But and we could up the game. I could have said, I drink a lot of Macallan 12, but if it was a signature drink, I think we should go to 18.
Perfect. Last one, you hinted at it earlier. I know there's so many amazing memories with the family up in Vermont, Steve and Phyllis's place, and those are some of my favorite pictures of Dana and Adam and Emmy and Jared as kids, and skiing and hands being cold and all that. But just amazing house up there, so many great memories. What would you say, if you had to pick one, what was your favorite memory from those trips up to Vermont?
Oh, it's always Christmas vacation, holiday season.
Chevy Chase?
Yeah. Back in the old days, there was more snow, but, the fireplace, the whole family being around, Scott's family, our family. I could never call it one memory, but just every Christmas was always spectacular.
It is, I have a warm, fuzzy feeling thinking about it, even though I wasn't there. But I also have a freezing cold feeling as well, because it gets way cold over there. But
there's nothing beautiful. Better than going out to dinner in the freezing cold and getting to the restaurant that has a really good fireplace going.
Oh yeah,
That's or coming back to the house.
That's nice. And then that's when Dana and Emmy would do their musical performances, right?
There were a lot of those for sure.
So at this point, I'd like to invite Dana to do a musical. No, I'm just kidding. But Gary, believe it or not, we made it. So thank you so much for being open to do this. I know, as you said, that you're not a big fan of interviewing, so this probably is a little bit out of your comfort zone. But this is awesome, and really enjoyed learning more about your background. And I know, there's historically with people and their father-in-law, like you never know how that relationship's going to be. But to take a line from that you said at our wedding, my father-in-law has been a mensch from the very beginning. So thank you so much. If you want to shout out anything, where would be the place for people to learn more about your business, or just if they want to connect with you on some sort of social media, whatever you want there?
Oh, they can always reach me on my email, I guess, which would be Gottdiener, GOTTDIENER @thesamplegroup.com.
Perfect. And then last thing, this is always the hardest question for everyone. Final thoughts. It could be a line, words to live by, whatever you want. Send us home here. It could be whatever you want.
If you have great loyalty to your family, friends, and customers, I think it comes right back at you.
Great loyalty and great wisdom from a great dude. Thank you so much, Gary. So grateful for you, for your family, for your daughter, and for coming on the podcast and being willing to join the fantastic company of the Wild Business Growth Podcast alumni base. On a more serious note, I think it goes without saying that this episode is dedicated to Steve Gottdiener, Gary's father and Dana's grandpa, as well as Pat Manente, Gary's longtime business partner. Both of them, while no longer with us, you can hear throughout this interview how big of a part they were in Gary's life, in the Gottdieners' lives, and so many people surrounding as well. So shout out Steve and shout out Pat. Thanks again, Gary, for being willing to do this. And thank you, Wild listeners, for tuning in to another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one and more Thanksgiving family specials, make sure to follow the Wild Business Growth Podcast on your favorite app and tell a friend about the podcast. You can also find us on Good Pods, where there are good podcasts and podcast recommendations. And for any help with podcast production, you can learn more at maxpodcasting.com and sign up for the Podcasting to the Max newsletter. That's at maxpodcasting.com/newsletter. Until next time, have a wonderful Thanksgiving if you are celebrating, and if not, have a wonderful day, week, year, etc. And of course, let your business run wild. Bring on the bongos!